Hello. Welcome to another episode of Funky Marketing Show, when we talk about marketing being done a little bit differently with a little bit of funk. So today I will have my good friend Joseph Lewin as a guest. We're going to talk about podcasting, about sales enablement. We're going to talk about how to create your own growth opportunity as a marketer. And all of that we're going to merge into something that we called how to acquire the right customers through the relationship centric revenue marketing. But before that, let's get to the funky intro, and then we'll bring my guest to the show. Let's go. And here we go. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm feeling a little funky after that music intro.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal. Because I've been thinking recently, and I started to create some posts around it because I never explained how do I think of funky marketing. What is it? And the first thing that I wanted to explain, what is actually funk? What is funk? It's not garbage. It's funk, meaning the funky music, and why that's important and why we should talk about it. So music is one of the biggest aspects in everything I do, everything we do, and basically, it goes with every mood, with every situation. And I don't know if it's the same thing about you now that you have that Florida sun, but if I'm all swamped in tasks and doing things, and I can get a little bit nervous because you just go and do. But oftentimes I feel like, man, something is missing. This is music. And when I play the music, okay, I can do it. I can sing, and everything is a lot smoother.
I love it. Yeah, and I feel like with marketing, especially in the B2B space, we can get so serious. And for most of my career, I was working around people who took themselves really seriously, and probably looking back on it, maybe too seriously. And I picked a lot of that up. And over the last couple of years, I've been working on not taking myself too seriously, taking the work seriously. And definitely we do, good work, and we take it seriously as far as that goes, but maybe not taking myself quite too seriously. And it's been way more fun, and I'm producing way better work at the same time. So
it gives you the sense of being relaxed, and just when you're more relaxed, then all those huge goals, tasks, and everything seems to be so smaller. And especially if you count in other stuff, which are like family, the rest of the life, so summer, sea, all those things, it actually helps. So it's not just like business, but all those things around business helps you actually be better at business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you, and it's I think for a while there, we were probably collectively, I'd say, taking things a little bit too seriously when it comes to business, and then trying to focus on numbers and revenue, and trying to get everything down to as much of a science as possible. And there's definitely a lot of value in that, and we've learned a lot. But I think the pendulum's kind of swinging back to where people are recognizing that we're humans and we interact together as humans, and optimizing for building deeper relationships with people is ultimately going to go a lot further. And most people prefer to work with people that they know, like, and trust. And I think the like part of it is doesn't get as much attention maybe as the know and trust part. And likability has to do with whether you'd want to hang out with that person, and whether you think that they're nice to be around or fun to be around. And when you work with people every day, it's one thing if it's a one-off project, but a lot of times in the B2B space, you're selling things that are not one-off projects where you're going to be working closely with either that person or their team for a long period of time, and very closely together, and it could impact your business and other parts of your life as well, depending on how easy it is to work with them. So I think it is actually a
Yeah.
really important factor.
Yeah, and you reminded me now of a friend of mine. I don't know if you know him from LinkedIn, like 𝗍𝗿će 𝗶𝗴𝘁 from Slovenia, and basically he started showing things out like gifs, photos of himself that his girlfriend took, all kind of, and everything is, have some sort of an edge, and it's interesting. And I told him, like, tell me, why exactly are you doing this? And he told me, listen, a guy told me, and by looking at the things, I think he's right. The guy, and also Misha for doing that, is, before I get into sharing what I know, sharing all the things I know, I want people to remember me and start to like me as a person. And then we'll move to business and we move to all those other stuff. And I think it's pretty clever strategy, if you are like one man show and you start getting into, creating relationships with people, right? Because they need to learn who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you think about it, like, I know some people have a problem with sharing personal stuff on LinkedIn, and it's definitely a preference. Some people don't feel comfortable doing that, and I understand that. But on the flip side, until recently, when you would spend time with people and build rapport, whether it's in the sales context or in just typical business, you start chatting with them about your family and things that are going on outside of work, and those things do come up in conversation. But when you're working remote and you're working online, a lot of times those things get ignored, and I think people feel like it's not important, or they should keep their business and their personal life separate. But the more that you do that, for one, to me, you have to find work-life balance if those things don't merge together, at least to a degree. So if you're not talking about things that are going on in your personal life, whatever about your family, or that you enjoyed a vacation, or that I'm down here in Florida for a month working remote thanks to my company being awesome, and if you don't talk about those kinds of things, then it all comes down to just, let's pull out the spreadsheet and look at the numbers, and makes it very transactional. And so I
Yeah,
totally agree. I share a decent amount of personal posts, and I think it helps warm up relationships and lets people know a little bit about me as a person before we ever have a conversation. And I find a lot of value in that.
agree. We're on the same point. Uh, One thing that we didn't get into is your background. Tell me and all everybody listening a little bit about your background, and then we're gonna move into those three topics that we set up to talk about today.
Yeah, I guess if we go way back, one of the most interesting things about me, and I won't make this a huge monologue, but I was born in a car, so that's kind of something that's probably the most
Oh man,
interesting about
that's
my
something.
background.
Yeah.
But career-wise, I actually got started in marketing. I don't have a degree, or I didn't finish college, and I was sweeping
Same,
chimneys for
same
5
here.
years.
Same here.
Yeah, so I was sweeping chimneys for 5 years, and was like black from head to toe every day. When I got home, when I'd shower, I'd have like literally black coming out of my hair. It was the worst job
Wow.
ever. But kind of started my career in learning about sales, because it was really a sales role, and I was driving 2.5 to 3 hours a day. So during that time, I started listening to a lot of audiobooks about business and marketing and psychology. And I probably listened to like 300 books on Audible and 1,500 podcasts on, marketing and business. And I consider that my education in the marketing world. And then from there, I ended up starting my own business, just because without a background, nobody was going to hire me into a marketing role. And I started working with small businesses, helping them first with like photos and videos and content related uh, uh, with content. And then from there, I realized, man, these businesses have absolutely no idea what to do with this content that I'm giving them. And I started to realize the importance of strategy and messaging. And so started helping them interview their customers and create messaging and productize their offerings, and all of these different things that are important when you're going to share a message. Like if your message isn't clear, you don't know who your audience is, and then you don't have a really clear way for them to understand what you do, then it's almost impossible to market your business, and you got to spend so much more money if you're not clear like that. And the interesting thing is that theme has really played through as I've worked at my previous role at Part Solutions, which was my first like real marketing job, in a product marketing role. And then what I'm doing now, it's still very much in the same vein of understanding who your audience is, clarifying your message, and then simplifying how you describe what you do and what your offering is so that people understand. And so anyway, kind of brought me to where I am today, and I'm still doing a lot of the same things that I was when I got started in marketing.
Man, that's a hell of a journey. Look, I was always wondering how it is, to how it feels to be the guy to clean up the chimneys and all those other stuff, because I rarely see them nowadays. I guess we have a few in the city, like one or two, not more than that for the whole city. But it's kind of interesting, and I've been thinking about that because uh, my weekend house that I have, the last time the chimney was clean was like, I don't know, 2015 or 14, probably. In 2015 my father died, who was living over there, and I was like, when I was selling it, I was like, man, you gotta clean the chimney first. Don't put on the fire before.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. As your resident chimney expert, I approve this message. You should get it clean.
Yeah,
That's funny, man.
exactly.
It was not a fun job.
I mean, you get into the people's houses and you need to talk to the people, and I always respect those things, because I was working for is it called the company that provides electricity to everyone here in the state. Basically, I was the guy who is going from house to house and actually seeing how much electricity did they spend per month. So also need to enter the house, enter the yard, whatever it is, and talk to different kind of people. And I guess
Yeah.
those kind of relationships uh, teach you how to communicate.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was probably in like 1,500 or more houses over the time that I was doing that job, and people are really passionate about their chimneys for some reason. It's like nostalgic. It brings them back to their childhood and, having a fire around Christmas and whatever. And, I'm basically going in, clean the chimney, and then we put a camera inside of there and be looking for anything that's damaged so that needs to be fixed. And it's not inexpensive to fix those things, but it could be ultimately pretty dangerous if you don't. So what would end up happening is I'm like, yeah, so your $129 chimney sweep just turned into, you need to spend $7,000 if you want to keep burning your chimney. And that didn't go over very well a lot of times, because it's just totally not what people were expecting. And they have this emotional attachment to it. So I definitely had some experiences where people got very angry. So I learned how to de-escalate situations, because I'm in this person's house and they're basically like cussing me out. I'm like, hey man, don't shoot the messenger, okay? So I totally agree. It was a great experience in sales, learning how to explain something more clearly to people so they understood what's going on, because people just see the fireplace opening, they don't have any idea what's going on. So explaining what's damaged inside of there and how to fix it, and then navigating those difficult customer conversations and de-escalating. So definitely glad for the experience.
Yeah,
But I'm
look,
also
that's.
glad I'm not doing it anymore.
I mean, it's something that you take away. It's the part of the of the growth process, and some things you learn over there, you picked up. And I always feel like we learn in so many in a non-formal way that we don't even understand until we are in the situation when we can implement those things, and when the situation requires us to get those skills out, and then we see, aha, I can actually do that. And I guess one of those skills that you develop over time is, talking to people and actually being having this kind of uh, thing that you can actually wait for the right moment to ask questions, to interrupt, to come up in it. You see, I'm still developing those things, but I think you are way, way better in that. And those are the skills that you need, especially if you are in using podcast as a mean to get results for your business. And
Absolutely.
I want to kind of use that as a bridge to get us to talk a little bit about podcasting. And one thing I want to throw over there is like I was just listening, riding my bicycle. I was listening to April Dunfell talking about positioning, of course. And one thing she said, and is the thing that I also think people overthink and get more into, is customer research, creating the ICP. They spend so much time digging uh, out stuff that they can ever implement in their marketing, meaning
Hmm.
going so deep and then forgetting all those stuff. And and usually I'm like, let's get the basics. Let's see who is the account champion, and how can we get them to buy. What are some things that we need to do, what are people that we need to do to get the champion to buy from us.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is a shortcut to get there is definitely a podcast.
Yeah. So actually, that is one other part of my story that I didn't share about, that I think sharing about why I got into podcasting and what happened from it in a minute or less would add some flavor to the conversation. So I started my podcast just over a year ago. It's called The Strategic Marketer. I don't remember what episode Nemanya's on there, but definitely check out his episode. It was awesome about building relationships with customers. So similar vein to what we're talking about today. But I started my podcast just over a year ago to build deeper relationships with other marketers in the industry. And probably more than anything else that I've learned over the last couple of years, it's that relationships really drive marketing, a significant amount of marketing. And so, I was having expert marketers on the show. I'm having the opportunity to learn from them, learn about their trade secrets, and people are willing to share lots of stuff when you have them onto a podcast that they might not otherwise. So I'd have people on from specialties that I'm not an expert in, and I'd ask them questions that I wanted to know, and learned a lot, built a lot of relationships. But then I actually ended up interviewing my now boss on my show, and we had a great conversation. And then after the show's done, he's like, "Hey, I have this job opportunity that I think you'd be a really good fit for. I'd love for you to interview." And the rest is history. And so, with podcasting, it's an incredible way to build relationships. It's an incredible way to stand out from other people. If you're interviewing somebody that you want to have a relationship with, whether that's a potential customer or whether it's somebody who's influential in the space, there's almost no better way to do it than inviting them to come on a podcast. And you can just build incredible rapport in a very short amount of time.
Agree. And it's, not even, you don't even need to interview those people directly. You can go, there are so many now different shows, different podcasts, where like you can find your ICP, your audience over there, and they're sharing not only business stuff but also some stuff around business that you can use to get more personal in communicating with them, and actually use them to start creating a relationship. But let me ask you, we're talking this thing about relationships, building relationships, and somebody would enter the chat and said, come on, it's a bullshit. There are definitely people thinking this way. So let's kind of get into this and debunk a little bit about what does it mean to actually build a relationship with somebody who can be your potential client.
Yeah, I do think it kind of goes back earlier in our conversation about people trying to boil business down to a science, and there's certainly aspects to that are true, but the more that you get it towards a science, the less of a human feel that your business has, and that's what people want to work with. I mean, we all want to work with people that we know, like, and trust, and that we can build rapport with. And the implementation, I mean, essentially, I would say that relationships speed up deals, so you can get to a deal a lot faster. And then if you have good rapport and good relationships with people, it's not just to get to the sale, it's what happens after the sale that's important. And so if you already have relationships, there's going to be more benefit of the doubt if something's going on, and your customer is much more likely to come to you if you have a good relationship with them and say, hey, this isn't working, let's figure something out, rather than them not telling you, hiding information, and then just dropping you much sooner. So, I mean, to me, across all aspects of the business, from, way before the sale happens, speeding up the sale, helping people understand who you are, and then all the way through actual implementation and having a successful ongoing relationship, all the way through that, relationships improve your chances at making more money over a much longer period of time.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, I would say is giving them just enough in each step of the buyer's journey so they can go to the next level. And by doing that, you are constantly there and you are constantly supporting them, because you actually are the supporting cast that tries to get your potential client to the place where you are actually there buying your product or your service to help them solve their problems. And also by doing that, by the time they buy, you have a relationship with them. So which means that when you get transactional, basically you already have a relationship, and it can continue and you can build up on that relationship that you have built, because it means that you already have trust, you have already proven your expertise. It means that you can work much more easier because your clients trust you, and by also doing that and proving that you can actually get them to results, you enlarge the trust and increase the lifetime value of each customer, because they will keep coming back to you if you are the one who is open and continuing the same kind of relationship that you already built with them.
Yeah. I mean, I think from a business perspective, if you think back to the companies that you've worked with in the past, which ones do you have more success with in the long run? Ones that were focused purely on the bottom line numbers, or the ones that were focused more on having mutual respect for each other and looking for mutual benefit? So to me, when there's transactions, when it's totally focused on a transactional relationship versus building more of a partnership in the long run, both parties have best interest in trying to hide as much information as possible on the transactional side, rather than sharing information. And the more that information is hidden, the less likely you're actually going to have a beneficial long-term relationship, because I'm trying to hide pricing as the vendor so I can try to charge you as much as I possibly can. And then you're trying to hide what your budget actually is so that you don't get overcharged. And, I'm trying to dig into what's going on so that I can manipulate you to make you feel like what I'm offering and the features and benefits that I have fulfill something that that you need. And then you're trying to hide what those pain points and problems are because you don't want to reveal something that gives me leverage in the conversation. And, from a business perspective, to me, that's completely inefficient and leads to long-term loss. So yes, in the short term, you could get more revenue if you focus on purely on transactions. And I'm talking about short-term revenue, like this month, this quarter, maybe this, the next 6 months. But anywhere beyond 6 months, relationships are going to end up giving you much more, you're going to get a lot more dividends from building those relationships. And I kind of see it as transactions. You're taking something out of the bank account, out of the relational bank account. Whereas, when you're focusing on building rapport and building relationship, you're really investing into your bank account. So it's almost like you're pulling out the money now instead of having it invested, where it's, you're getting compound interest and having that build over time.
Yeah, Tell me one thing. So you said you're using podcasting to for a couple of things, to interview potential customers or existing ones, to learn from your peers, from people who are already doing some things that you want to do, or some things that doing differently. So you want to learn what is missing in your strategy and the way you work. What are some other things that you're using podcasting for?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add on to what you're saying that I'm kind of delving into at the moment is I feel like in marketing and sales we focus way too much on the decision maker when they're the least likely person to trust you, because they're the one that has the risk. Like they're the one that's going to be on the line if things go wrong. Whereas anybody peripheral to them, whether it's their peer, whether it's their boss, whether it's their direct report, or somebody in a different department, all of those people are going to trust you a lot more easily because they have absolutely no risk in working with you. That person's boss has a little bit more risk than the person themselves, but whoever's actually going to sign on the dotted line and make the decision, they have a lot of risk. And so you can also use a podcast to find people who are influential to your decision makers and have them on. And then maybe that person shares the episode with them, or you could share the episode with them and be like, hey, I just had a colleague of yours on. I thought you might find this interesting. That's going to go a lot further with them if they know who that person is, or if that person's influential to them, than you just reaching out cold and saying, hey, I have this product I think you'd be interested in. You should trust me. And then if their colleague is, this kind of plays into the next piece of where podcasting is amazing. I think people assume that when they have expertise, that people will think that they're more credible. And so then people try to share about how much of an expert they are. So, I have 3 doctorates in whatever, and I've published research papers and all of these different things. That doesn't really instill credibility, especially when you say it about yourself. But there's this like magic that happens when you're on a podcast or when you do something with somebody that's already trusted. You gain credibility by association with that person. And it's one of these weird human psychology things that doesn't make any logical sense at all, really. But like just the fact that we're in a show together is going to make people in both of our spheres trust both of us more, gives both of us credibility. And so when you have, I call it credibility by association. So if there's somebody in your sphere that has credibility, just by inviting them onto a show and talking to them and interviewing them, people are going to assume credibility to you. And you don't even have to say anything super smart in the episode or even add that much value. If you just ask good questions and pull the value out of that other person by asking really good questions, people are going to assume by your questions that you know what you're talking about. And it's so then it makes really great content for both sharing on social. It makes great content for sharing through micro clips, through paid ads. And you could repurpose it by taking some of the thoughts from that and turning it into whatever, an article or a one-off written blog post or a graphic or anything like that. So beyond building the rapport, you're also getting great relationship and then gaining that extra credibility because of that person's credibility.
Yeah, totally agree. And those are important things, because you mentioned one of the most common biases in B2B, and it is, how people make decisions. Because like I had Rory Sutherland here on the show talking about exactly those things. Because like, you are the CMO, or you are the CTO or head of product, whatever it is. You need to invest in software that will, help you out, or you need to invest in an agency. But to lower the the scarcity for your role, and to kind of lower the risk, you just go and you pick up, you Google and you pick up the best one that appears over there, or you just ask around, find the list. That's the number one, let's pick those guys, no matter if they are the fit or not for you, no matter if they are working with the kind of companies you have or know. And if they fail, you can always say, they are the best. Everybody says that. You can go and check it out, right? So one of the most famous biases in B2B and the way decisions are being made. And this is also one of the reasons why, like, as CMOs and people in high roles go from companies to companies, they bring their own people or agency or whatever it is with them, often because they trust them, to
Yeah.
eliminate those things. And what you said, using the podcast for that, is a great example of how you can use actually the podcast, create things out of it, and eliminate that biases, but also create a relationship with somebody that is, there is less likely to be in danger by recommending you and what you sell.
Yeah, 100%. I think the risk thing is in the B2B space is very under. We don't think about it enough because it's really risky for somebody especially in the corporate world. Like if you're working at a big enterprise, risk is a really big deal, and it's not just the business risk. It's the personal risk that person's taking. Like they're taking a personal risk. They're taking an internal political risk by changing from the status quo. And so, if there's a vendor that you're already working with and nobody likes them, it's still extremely risky for somebody to bring in somebody new, because if you just stick with the person you've had, you go, well, yeah, we all know they're not great, but what else is out there? What the enemy, is better than the enemy you don't know, I guess, in a sense. And that's a huge part of the reason why some of these incumbent software companies or incumbent companies stay in these companies, in large corporations for so long. Is because it's a huge risk for somebody to actually drive change in the organization. And then if you get it wrong, it could totally destroy your career. I mean, if you bring in the wrong vendor and you spend $1 million or a couple $1 million, depending where you are in the organization, it could totally destroy your opportunity to grow in that organization. And so it's something I think people take really seriously, but then they don't really talk about that. Like, who's going to come out and say, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to work with you because when I'm weighing how internally, politically, that could affect me and my career growth, I'm not going to do that. Instead, they're going to be like, your price is a little too high, so that's why we didn't go with you. And
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's something people miss a lot.
There is also one thing you reminded me of, and it's thing I think Gaetano Di Nardi talked a lot in the I don't know, like 4 or 5 months ago, was B2B companies, those in a more mature stages, usually hire somebody to be a VP of marketing or CMO, somebody that has already experience in the same industry or in the same niche even. And they do this to kind of lower the risk. But at the same time, they just fire the person who was there with the same experience. And it didn't get them results. So instead of bringing somebody with a different kind of experience, who maybe has never been a CMO but has all the experience to be, they just decide, let's go in a more secure way, and and they just keep doing what they were doing all the way, and it's basically the road to nowhere. And it's happening a lot, but I always say, like, some companies deserve to die. Not every company deserves to grow and to go to the next level.
Yeah, and on the same note, I think there's some clarification we could make around why building relationships makes sense in the long run. First of all, when you're a small company, how do you gain your first couple customers and let's say in the first few years that you're growing, where do most of your customers typically come from? I'm asking you, where do most of your customers
No.
come from
I'm
in your
asking. I'm
first
just
couple years?
selling the content. Yeah. Basically, it's coming from the people you know. Usually, At least
Yeah.
that's how I see it. When you are small, when you are growing, there's a small number of people in your community around you, and you relate to those people.
Yeah, exactly. So you have as an individual person when you're starting a business, either you have some people in your community that need what you have, and that's you accidentally start is how most people do it. They have a friend that goes, "Oh, could you build a website for me?" And you go, sure. That's all of a sudden you're an entrepreneur, and then their friend asks, and then then you get a couple referrals coming in, and you start through relationships. And then for some reason you get to a certain size and people think that they need to do something different than that. Now, the reason that that happens is because you kind of tap out your network and you want to grow faster. You get to this point where you hire in a bunch of people and you need to scale and you need to bring in more business than what's coming in from your referral network. But then instead of pursuing business the way that they always have, which is building deep relationships with people, offering a great service, basically your product and what you do ends up being most of your marketing early on. You do great work, it shows, and you get referrals because you're doing great work. But then that switches to where people are like, okay, well, let's crunch the numbers, let's cut costs, and then let's invest in a sales team. And then you kind of build out as far as you can with the sales team, and your sales team is still building relationships with people, but typically slightly more transactionally than maybe the owner would. But then you get to the point where you go, okay, now we really want to scale, let's bring in marketing. And then instead of thinking in terms of like, how do we build deeper relationships with people, we go with what we know. We go with what's going on in the industry and what's been going on, which is, how do we then take what's going on in the sales space and basically like amplify the most transactional part of the sales conversation, which is like, we have a better product, we have these awesome features and benefits, buy from us. And then you get that message out there at scale. And at a certain point, that kind of drops off too. But instead, when you get to that point where you're going to grow your marketing, you can focus more on the same things that you did early on: meeting people, getting your name out there, building trust in within a community of people that need what you have, and then making sure that your product and your messaging align with what they need, delivering on that exceptionally, talking about how you deliver on that exceptionally with other customers. And then it takes a little bit longer to get that engine going, but once you do, you get referrals coming in. So instead of your marketing having to do all of the work and then you shut off your ad dollars and it's done, you have all of these people that you've influenced. Some of them will have never even bought from you before, but you've built rapport with them to the point where they recommend you. And I've had that experience. I've built relationship with people through LinkedIn specifically. I learned about their product. I thought it was really valuable, and I've gotten them a ton of business. And some of these companies, I've gotten them a decent amount of business, having never worked with them before, because I've built rapport with them, and that's led to ongoing recommendations from me. And I have absolutely no incentive to do that. And so, to me, putting that effort to consider building your business in the same way you did at the beginning through your marketing, by building these deep relationships and delivering an awesome product, that's the way to really grow in the long run compared to this transactional focus.
I totally agree, and what you said is very valuable. I hope people get it. If guys, if you didn't listen and you're just hearing me saying that it's valuable, it's time to stop, go back, and listen to everything that's been said again. One thing that stands out is that you don't necessarily need to go directly to the customers. Sometimes you can use your peers to help you get there, and uh, it's one thing that in the long run will work even better than going directly to the customers, because usually you have, like, let's say 100 potential customers, right? uh, Usually that's a list of like 50 or 100, but you have at least 5 times that peers that are all there going after the same target group, or going after the similar target groups, or just considering you as authority. I always like that, to be able to get referrals from people. They need to see you as authority, as a teacher. You need to get to that level. To be able to do that, you need to produce great content. Show that you know things, that you have experience, give them a different view, which means all of these things that we mentioned before, getting to know the companies you are working with and that you are talking about. And when you close all that out, all that circle, at least that's what's happening to me. I want to ask you how it is with you. Like, most of the recommendations I get are from my peers. Some of them I never talk to, but they are, consuming the content, looking at the podcast or listening. Some of them are, if you go now and you check it out, you will think that we are competitors, but for some reason we are not maybe in the same market, or we are not in the same pricing range, or whatever it is, or we are doing some things a little bit differently, but we respect each other and we recommend each other. And the third one is your existing clients. And I think like that third part, your existing clients, is usually the smallest group, and it can dry out very fast if you count only on that part. So
Yeah.
that's maybe the beginning, but you start with that and you develop those other two groups.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I'd say kind of the same thing applies to content and content distribution. So we've probably all heard that content is king. And my friend Eddie Saunders says content is king, but relationships are his queen. So and if we're thinking in terms of chess, if your king dies, or if you lose your king, then you lose the game. But the queen's the one that rules the board. And so I like that analogy because to me, if you have okay content, but you have a great network of people who are invested in you personally, your content's going to go way, way further than if you have really good content, but you don't have any friends at all. And I've known people and seen people that create really good, solid content, and they get absolutely no engagement on it. And then I'll see other people who have pretty subpar content that do exceptionally well. And what's the difference? One person is really well connected and the other person isn't. And that's true for your business too. Like you can be the best in the world at what you do, but if you haven't been building deep relationships with people, nobody knows that you exist, and nobody knows that that's going on. And I think the challenge is when you try to hype yourself up by talking about features and benefits, or talking about what typical marketing does. We're the best, we have the most experience, we have a team that has collective 729 years of experience in your industry, whatever. It's like nobody's going to really believe you, and you might actually be the best. You might have the best experts on your team, but you have to let somebody else say that. And when it's a customer that says that about you, or it's, you're on a podcast and we're sharing information here, somebody else gets to see that because you're drawing that out of me and I'm drawing that out of you. And so it's more trustworthy when it's through a conversation like this. So anyway, I'm with you. I think we're tracking on the same page. I think one other thing I'd add to it is, my daughter's waking up, so there might be a little slight crying in the background here for a second. But
that's nice.
One other thing I would add to it is that relationships are for the long haul. Like if you want to build a business, or you want to build, let's even take it away from the focus on your if you're an employee and you don't own the business, and you want to grow in your career over the long haul, doing marketing that focuses around building rapport with people in your industry is a much better career move than just pumping out as much content as you possibly can in a back corner somewhere. Like if you want to grow in your career, you want to accelerate in your career, creating content with other people, like what we're doing right now in your space, it positions you to have a much more vibrant career, whether that's at the same company, because people start to go, man, this person really knows what they're talking about. We need to make sure to keep them here. And so, they give you incentive to stay through pay or, whatever other means they have at their disposal. Or you get noticed by another company that comes in and goes, hey, we're going to pay you twice what you're making where you're at because you clearly know what you're doing and we want you here. So, from a career perspective, way smarter to be focusing on this kind of content. But then from the company perspective, if you're looking again for like short-term goals and it's all driven on this month's quota or next month's quota or whatever, like, sure, building relationships with people might take a little bit longer. But if you're looking to build a company that lasts for a long time and has a solid reputation, relationships are where it's at. I mean, you go so much further, and especially in the B2B space, because it is all built on relationship. Like if you, we talked about this earlier on in the show, but you're going to be working with these companies for a long time and typically very closely together. And if that was purely built on a transaction, it's really hard to sustain that. And perfect example of that is that, you have a procurement department that's job is to try to get the best pricing. And so then they're trying to get the person on the other side, the vendor, to cut their prices as much as possible. What ends up happening is you have a vendor that doesn't know what they're doing and they cut their prices too far and they can't actually profitably finish the job, which means they go out of business halfway through the project. And who wins at that point? The procurement team successfully drove a company out of business. Good job. Congratulations. You got the best price. Nice work there. And then the company doesn't win either, because now they have a half-done job that they've already invested money into, but they've also invested time into. And then now they need to hire a new company to come in, probably pay them significantly more to fix the crappy work that was done by the first company. And so, if you want to have partners that work with you and actually do good work, focusing on relationship from the buying perspective and the selling perspective makes a lot of sense.
Man, as we talk, so many biases appear that are happening every day in B2B. And, just by being honest, by getting to know your customers and focusing on giving value and, like basically having a story, because like I feel in B2B, like story is the strategy to simplify things. You get to avoid all those biases and get to the point when you are the obvious choice when decision making comes. Because I think what we didn't mention, and it relates to all the stuff that we talked about, is that 95% or even 97, 98% of your target audience, if you're in B2B, aren't in the market right away to buy. It's less than 3%, and when you lead with that fact, it changes all the things and the way you think about actually doing marketing and going to the market. Because like your market doesn't exist, you need to create it. It will exist in a few months, in a year, wherever it is. They are not over there. The companies are not over there. So you need to go and actually invest in building long-term relationships. So when it happens, it happens. And then uh, I may add a few examples. Like if you're selling, for example, to the companies, they're technical products, industrial products that you buy once in 5 years, right? So when you sell it, you are not ending the relationship. Basically, you are just starting the deeper relationship, because you don't know what will happen in 5 years when you need to renew and sell again. So something may happen, like the management may change. Uh, I don't know, like the product can be damaged. So you need to be there to help them solve those issues out. You need to educate them constantly. You have to ask them how they are. Is the product going well? How are things going? A lot of things get into preserving the relationship. So like it's not just buy, you buy, and then we go. It's way longer than that. And by having all those things in mind, that's where like comes things that we talk about. So podcasting, creating content with the potential customers, including them in distribution, and not only them, but also other people that influence the decision making.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important that kind of ties into what you're talking about here with people not being ready to buy is in the B2B space. A lot of times, especially if you're working with the government or very large companies, they're going to come up with a project, they're going to put together what they think is needed, and then they're going to put it out to bid. And then, you bid on the job, and whoever has the best pricing a lot of times, although that is changing just because of what we talked about a second, where companies underbid and it doesn't work out. So there are some other factors that are starting to come into play, but your chances of winning that are tiny, absolutely tiny. Again, if we're thinking about risk, they're going to go with the incumbent as long as the pricing is within a reasonable amount, just because it's so much less riskier. They're going to go with the best company that has the best market share, just because it's less risk. So in order to get into some of these markets, you really have to differentiate your product, and you have to start doing that way before that goes out to bid, before they have the dire need for what you do. Because as soon as they have the dire need, which is a lot of times where companies are getting involved, your chances go down significantly. But if over the course of 5 years, you're defining what the specs should be for that job, or you're defining how they should go about solving this problem, the chances that they're going to end up going with somebody else are tiny at that point. And so maybe you don't even ever get the chance to talk to that customer for 4 or 5 years, but they see your content show up on LinkedIn, or, they see it on your YouTube channel, or they got onto your podcast because you had somebody on there that was influential to them. And then they keep listening because it was interesting. And they then learn about how what you do is actually differentiated, and they start shifting their mind. When they're ready, then they're going to come to you and go, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast for a long time. We're now trying to figure out how we're going to solve this problem. Would you come in and help us figure out what we need to do?" And then if you get in the conversation at that point, you're a trusted advisor, you're seen way more as a partner, and you get to define the way that the company solves the problem, rather than coming at the end and trying to go, "Our features and benefits are better than our competitor." Like, I don't want to work in that kind of a space. It's that's not fun to do that kind of marketing, and I don't think it's ultimately that effective either.
Love it, love it. That's greatly said. And I need to add one thing that I consider as like a conclusion of that part. Like Ryan Paul Gibson said, uh, diagnose stuff before you do stuff. So know your things, know how you're gonna react, how you're gonna build things, then start building. Because it's okay to go blind. It's okay to not get too deep into the things, but know why you are doing what you are doing and what is the goal that you expect to come out of it. Like, and there's Misho added a comment: the transaction first attitude is kind of like approaching an animal with fear. They always smell your real intention, much like customers do when you're just looking to empty their pockets. And that's not to say customers are animals.
I love that. Yeah, they get treated like animals, right? Let's go. We have hunters and we have farmers. You hear that term around sales, and it's like a lot of the terminology around sales is like entrapment and and tricking, or I use the term prospect, but even in prospect, it's like, we're going to mine for gold. Like, what do you do when you're prospecting? You go and try to mine gold. It's like, that doesn't feel very good to be prospected, right? Like, how does it feel to be on the other end and be prospected or be hunted or whatever? And you could tell, you really can. And you hide your cards. So if you want your customers to not hide their cards in the next sales conversation that you have, focus on creating some more relationship focused marketing content.
Yeah, and I would recommend to everybody, start reading some epic fantasy novels, because like all the things that you said, I just read last night in one of the novels, including the animals and all that comparison that Misha said, because like one of the ghosts was in having a shape of a lamb, and the guy saved the lamb, didn't even know. But after a couple of years, he reveals everything and how it all went down, and it is the same. It's the same with these things we're talking about. But uh, we are at the end, and one thing that I would like us to give to the people who are listening, maybe a couple of short, actionable steps they can use to kind of acquire the right customers through those things that we are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen be incredibly effective, and we do this at Proofpoint, but I've been doing this, like I said at the beginning, back to the very beginning of my marketing career, when I was working for myself. Talk to your customers and interview them. Like, start there. Interview your ideal customers. Who do you like working with? And learn about why they work with you, and listen for the common language that they use. Maybe they all use exactly the same word. Well, that's something you need to pay attention to. Then going outside of that, start interviewing other people in the market, and start getting in front of them so you can start learning what's the gap between your current customers and people in the market that are similar to them but haven't bought from you or don't have that trust, and start to listen for their common language. And that's the language you want to use in your marketing, on your sales pages, and all of that side of things. And to me, the best way to do that is to start a podcast and invite those people on, both your customers and your prospects, because you want to add value to people. And the more you add value, the more likely they are to reciprocate. So if you just go out to some random person that's in your target market and you go, hey, will you talk with me and help me sell to you? It's like, no. But if you go, hey, I want to promote you, I want to promote your business, I want to help make you look really good on a podcast, you're clearly an expert in your field, would you be open to coming on and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with my audience? They're going to go, heck yeah. And you're not actually screwing them over or lying to them. You're adding an incredible amount of value. One of the best things that you can give to somebody is that credibility. It's making them look like an expert. Like what you're doing for me right now is one of the best things that anybody could do in my career, which is you're highlighting me as an expert because you're saying Joe's smart enough about marketing to come on my show. And you're adding a ton of value. It makes me way more open to sharing openly with you and to building rapport. And then you can ask follow-up questions after that. And that person's going to be much more friendly with you at that point. So that's the most practical advice. If you're not ready to kick off a podcast, do what 𝗍𝗁𝗍's doing, which is go live. It's way less production work on the back end, but you still get the value of connecting with that person and building rapport.
Yeah, 𝗍𝗁𝗍 is doing both, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. I can add to that. First, I have no idea why more people aren't doing what you just said, because it's kind of obvious way, and it doesn't cost that much to kind of because you're starting a business, you have at least 50 to 100 accounts that you want to close. Why don't you invite them for a one-on-one conversation? I mean, that's it. Like, and you're including them in the content creation, in the distribution. You are giving them authority and credibility. They are giving you authority and credibility, and it all goes uh, in a way where it should. And also, like, one additional thing that you can do is go live, not with, for example, with Restream, but use Zoom to kind of have the audience on the call with you, uh, that will come back from week to week. That's kind of how to build. That's how Refine Labs build. That's how Marty Sanchez and I build audience for another podcast that we have. And it's a nice one because you basically have recurring audience for anytime you do a podcast.
I like that.
Man, one thing for the end, tell everybody where they can reach out to you, find more information. We'll have that attached to the episode, but for those that are just listening, tell them a little bit more where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, LinkedIn is definitely where I hang out the most. I interview really smart people like 𝗍𝗁𝗍 on my podcast, The Strategic Marketer. So you could look up The Strategic Marketer wherever you listen to podcasts. And then I'm a director of demand generation at Proofpoint. marketing, and we help customers do a lot of things we're talking about here. But we focus specifically on B2B companies that are in more of technical spaces. So like med device companies and engineering companies and kind of more technical spaces. So yeah, love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me in a DM. Let me know that you listened to this episode, and we'll start a conversation and start building some relationship through the podcast.
Exactly. Let's see. We have another comment before we end. Like CXL has been doing these hot seats where the speaker would do his plug at the beginning and then just pull random peeps out of the audience to add to the convo live. I really like that format. Yeah, that's a good one. You can always include people in recordings, give them a space to jump in. Yeah, guys, thanks for
Love it.
listening. Joseph, there for being on the show, for sharing things. I think we share a lot of great stuff. And for everybody listening, I think if you didn't get all the stuff, go back to the beginning of the podcast, listen to everything again, the full hour of us sharing things, and make sure you go to Joseph and ask questions if you have them while you're listening, and also go back just to connect with the guy and uh, say hi and start a relationship, because that's all that matters, right? For
Yeah.
the end,
Thanks for having me on, my man. It's been fun. It's been funky.
anytime we're gonna repeat that, guys. For the end, always, as we say, keep it funky. That's all that matters. Bye bye.